Why does it feel like some artists are releasing music all the time? Is there such thing as releasing too many singles close to each other? And how have album release strategies changed from a few decades or even just a few years ago? Today we're talking all things the Waterfall Release Strategy and why it might be the best choice for your next release. So first up, what actually is the Waterfall Release Strategy for releasing an album? You may have heard more and more recently about this mythical Waterfall Release Strategy of releasing an album, but it's actually quite easy to understand and you've probably even seen it employed in practice. Decades ago, in the days of physical media, the only choice for an album release was an album release. All the songs contained in one package, all of the songs of the album released at the exact same time. Eventually with physical media, but also mainly with streaming, it became the norm to release a couple of the very best singles from the album beforehand. This not only built hype for the upcoming album, but also meant the artist in general was discussed and just in the spotlight for a longer period of time. And looking at how that progressed over time, we arrive naturally at what is now known as the Waterfall Album Release Strategy. In short, a waterfall album release strategy of an album means that typically more singles from the album are released over a longer period of time before the album is released. And crucially, each time a new single is released, it's added to the exact same body of work as the previously released singles. That means at any given time during the lead up to the album, you can look on streaming services and see the most recently released single with all the previously released singles directly beneath it. This obviously means more music is being released before the album is, and it means more songs are being put out on a more regular basis. By the time of the actual album release, you may only even have a few songs left to put out, but they'll all be released at the exact same time, the album release day, and then the final album is out there in the world. Here are a couple of key things to know about the Waterfall album release strategy. First up, something that makes the Waterfall release strategy very, very appealing is that when you release a song as a single, and then when it's present on the later released album, it uses the exact same ISRC code. And that means that all the streams, likes, playlist ads, everything for the song when it's released as a single, when it's accumulated during the promo period, carries over to the same song when it's then present on the final album. That means essentially that the album has already gained all of these listens, all of these favorites, all of these playlist ads before the final album is actually released into the world. Previously, when a song was released as a single and then it was released on the album, it kind of acted as two separate releases of the same song. This split all of the listens, all of the likes, all of the favorites, and it's not the best way to do it. With a Waterfall album release strategy, that means all the likes, everything that's accrued on the single, then carries over to when it's present in the album. Furthermore, one of the great things about releasing your music in this way is every time you release a new single before the album and it gains traction, it's very, very likely that new listeners or old listeners alike will listen to your new single and then will easily go on to listen to your previously released singles as they're in the exact same body of work. As for how often to release new music in the Waterfall release strategy, it's kind of up to you. There are some general rules to go by and some different strategies you can implement. Some artists choose to have a rigid plan of when they want to release each single, which singles they want to release, and then when the final album will come out. But others choose to release a single or two, see how they perform, when their performance dips over time, and then release new music accordingly. Now generally, you don't want to leave less than 4 weeks between each single release. You want to give each enough time to breathe. About 6 weeks is generally accepted as a good length of time. So what are the benefits and why do some artists go for this strategy? Well, first up, obviously, you're releasing music more regularly. That's kind of the whole point. This is great for your fans. It's been shown that everyone's attention spans over time are generally getting lower. This means rather than a big, hefty release of an album, audiences are now prioritizing and preferring more regular releases of fewer songs at a time. Not only does this mean people generally prefer smaller releases over a longer period of time, but it also means people are less likely to go ahead and listen to a whole album if it's all dropped at once. Streaming services these days are obviously capitalizing upon this change. That means from Spotify to Apple Music to Tidal, Deezer, everything, it's going to be better for you to release more music over a longer period of time rather than drop everything in one album at once. Practically, this means that algorithms of all these streaming services are going to prefer you if you're releasing more music more regularly. And this massively increases your chance of your music being featured on algorithmic playlists. These are obviously some of the very biggest playlists on Spotify and are customized to each individual listener. And if you can get more music on more of these, That's going to be very advantageous to your music journey. But the waterfall release strategy also increases your chances of getting on editorial playlists. These are the biggest playlists on Spotify. And actually teams at Spotify and all of these streaming services are created just to curate the music that goes on these playlists. And the controversial thing is, you only get one chance to pitch your music for these playlists per release. Now that doesn't mean per song release, that means per any release. If you release a song, you get one chance to pitch for these playlists. If you release an album of 72 songs, you get one chance to pitch for these playlists. You have to choose the song you think has the best chance. So you want to give yourself the most chance to pitch for these playlists as possible. And the way you're going to do that is by maximizing your number of releases and maximizing the number of songs you release as singles. These playlists are notoriously extremely competitive, and it's not an exaggeration to say getting your music featured on these editorial playlists can literally create your whole music career. Finally, something you can only really do with a waterfall album release strategy, once you've released, most of your singles, a lot of the album is already out there in the world, you might start to notice that a few of your singles have popped off, done really well, exactly what you wanted, they're doing great. But some you hoped would do better than they aren't really doing much at all. When you're creating your final album near the end of your waterfall release strategy, what you can do is quietly forget about these songs. If you want to create the very best album possible, maybe you're looking for just the highest quality songs, the best performing singles to go on this album and create the highest quality body of work. You can just not put some of these singles that didn't do very well on this final album, create a shorter album than expected with more songs that people recognize. Let's look at an actual example of the waterfall release strategy implemented by the band Spiritbox. Spiritbox implemented the waterfall release strategy with their album Eternal Blue. The very first single they released was called Holy Roller. Then a few weeks later, they released their new single, Constance. When Constance was released, it was right at the top of the body of work, and directly below it was Holy Roller, the previously released single. That meant for any new listeners or old listeners alike, when they listened to Constance, they were much more likely to go ahead and listen to the other newly released single, Holy Roller, released just a few weeks prior. Similarly, with the next two singles, Circle With Me, Secret Garden, exactly the same strategy was implemented. The newest single at the top, the previously released singles making up the upcoming album directly beneath it. Spiritbox released a total of 5 singles before the album was released, in the waterfall release strategy way. This meant that every time one of these new singles were released, people were much more likely to go and listen to the previous singles, but also they were just in headlines for a much longer period of time, and hype for the album was building up steadily over the course of this period. And as previously discussed, all of the streams, all of the likes, all of the listens accumulated during the singles being released in the promotion period, then accumulated and contributed to the final album's numbers. That's really everything about a waterfall release strategy, what it actually involves, and how some people choose to implement it and why. But if you were to implement the waterfall release strategy for your next release, how would you go about it and what do you need to know? First of all, you want a really solid calendar and plan of attack before you start releasing any music at all. It's a good idea to first up decide your release date for your final album and work backwards from that. You want to think which of your singles on this final album are good enough to release as singles on their own and which you might want to save for the final album release. You can then space out all of your singles in the album's promo period. Try and stick to that 6 weeks per single release strategy. You don't want to be putting too many singles too close to each other, less than 4 weeks apart. And then you can see how long your promo stage is going to be, how many singles you're going to leave for the final album release, and then plan what you need to do, what artwork you need well in advance before any music is released over this period. Artwork is something you also want to have ready well in advance. You don't want to be worrying about artwork, digital art, when you're in the course of releasing each single. You want to be exclusively worrying there about promoting each single as best as possible. Here at Music Gateway, we specialize in the waterfall release strategy. We've been helping artists do this. We've been helping artists release music in general. We can help you with AI mastering, sync licensing, publishing your music, promoting your music, all you need for your music journey. And unlike most other music distributors, we don't take a cut of your royalties. At Music Gateway, you pay a small membership fee every month, and then all your royalties are completely yours. We're not interested in taking a share of that. We're interested in helping you get your music out there. You can even distribute your first single for completely free and see if Music Gateway works for you, see if you like how everything works, if it works for you as an artist in general. And if not, no worries, you haven't lost anything, you can go elsewhere, and that's absolutely fine. Also, if you have previously released music, you can transfer the distribution rights over to Music Gateway so we can ensure you're getting paid everything you're owed and help you manage your releases in future. So if you're releasing music soon, you might want to try the Waterfall Release Strategy. And if you want to, you can do it at musicgateway.com. Thank you for watching.